Alright, so here we have the electronics assembly guide for the RepRap Prusa i3 build guide, although this exact same build guide will work for the i2 version as well. Just to go over what we're going to have, we have our Atmega 2560 board, which is essentially the brain of the RepRap, and it's also what interfaces with the computer. We have our Ramps 1.4 controller board. This is where your power supply, your bed, your end stops, your motors, and your stepper drivers are all going to connect to. Here we have our stepper drivers. This is going to tell the motors how many times to step and when to step. And even though we have 5 motors, we're only going to use 4 stepper drivers because the 2 Z-axis motors are going to use the same driver. So first we'll just go into real quick how to get the stepper drivers on the Ramps board. You'll see here, if you look at your Ramps board in front of you, they'll be labeled X, Y, Z, E0, and E1. We're only going to use E0 because we only have one extruder. X, Y, Z, as you've probably assumed, are for the axis motors. So you'll see there are 6 pins here, 6 here, and these here have what we call jumpers on them, and they control the steps of the drivers. So for these, we're going to use 3 jumpers on the 6 pins so that they are all covered. And they just slide right on. Nothing difficult about them. Alright, so those are all covered now. And the stepper driver is going to just plug right on top of them. Now, you may have to do some testing to make sure the direction of the motors are turning properly. However, we know that the pot on this driver will face away from the power supply connection. And you just push that in until it snaps. Now, your stepper drivers are also going to come with some heat sinks that have some stickers on the back. You just peel them off and stick them right on top the chip there. And then the Ramps board will connect on top of the Arduino using these pins on the bottom and these ports on the top, and you simply push the two together. Now, your motor connections are going to go in these 4 pins along the sides here. And these are basically going to be the polarities, the 2A, 2B, and 1A, 1Bs. So we're going to show you real fast how to test a couple of pairs on the motors. So using a NEMA 17 stepper motor, you're going to have 4 leads. Now, we know our pairs are black and green and red and blue. But in order to test these pairs, because you may not be using the same type of motors, we're going to test them. So you'll notice if we touch the green and then touch the black, our multimeter tells us they're a pair, just as if we touch the red and the blue. But if we touch the green and the blue, silence. So we know those are not a pair. So we know that black and green are 1A and 1B. So, on the ramps, you'll see on these 4 pins right above them, it's written 2A, 2B, 1B, 1A. And you'll simply plug in your pairs to their respective positions. And there you go. You have your stepper driver for the X-axis, and then the X motor is now plugged in. Although you're going to want to assemble the printer with the motors attached before plugging them in to the controller board. And now we're going to move into the end stops, but first we're going to go over how to solder them. Thank you. Alright, so here we're going to solder the end stops and then show you where they go on the Ramps board. We have our soldering iron and our soldering wire. It's going to act basically as the bonding agent to make sure that the wire sticks securely to the end stop. We've already wrapped our wires around the first and third end stop port, which will be COM and NC. Our red wire here is the COM and the blue wire is the NC. So we're going to melt a little bit of our soldering wire and just sort of spot weld it essentially on to the end stop to secure the wires. And we'll do this and make sure it's all the way around. And we'll make sure to do both of them. A little bit more. Okay, and that's all of that. So we have our end stop. Remember to make sure that you skip the second one and just do the first and third, which are COM and NC. So we're going to flip it around here and do the Molex connecting side, where we are going to strip the wires, crimp the pins on them, and then stick them in the connector. So I've already done one of them, but we'll go over here and we'll strip this wire. Alright, twist it off to make sure that it's going to slide in the connector easily. Then you'll have these little crimping pieces in your set, and these are what are going to snap into the Molex connector. So you should slide it through there until the arms at the bottom of the crimping piece are wrapped around the unexposed wire. Then we're going to bring over our crimping tool and pinch it essentially so that those two arms look like they are hugging the wire. And then we're going to cut off the extra on the end. Alright, then these two pieces, remember red is our COM in this instance, so we are going to stick it in the middle port. Okay. And blue we are going to stick, which is our NC, in the part of the Molex connector. You may not be able to see it, but it has an arrow on it. And we are going to go ahead and stick that blue one, the NC, in the arrow part. Okay, so we have our connector made. Now we're going to bring the ramps over here. And if you can see these parts here, it's written on the board itself, it says end stops. On the top part you'll see an S, a minus, and a plus. We're going to stick our COM, which is in the middle port right now, to the minus section, and the NC to the S. I'm just going to snap it on like this in the first port. Now the first port is going to be an axis. You're going to skip the second, go to the third, that'll be another one. Skip the fourth, go to the fifth, and that'll be your third axis. So you want to make sure you put in your end stops in every other port with the COM in the negative and the NC on the S. But you're going to want to connect these to your printer before you plug everything in the ramps board, just as we said with the motors. So that's all for the end stops. Next we'll go over the power. Alright, so now we're going to wire the power supply. Provided with most of these power supplies is a regular cable with the 3-prong end that'll go into the back of most power supplies, but for this one we are going to have to cut the cable on the end. Just strip it like you'd strip any other wire, and on the inside you're going to have a green, a black, and a red wire. These are going to go into the ground, neutral, and live respectively. As always, black is your neutral, green is your ground, red is your live. And all that's going to do is you're just going to take your power supply, open up this little yellow hatch here, and in ports 7, 8, and 9, unscrew them, slide in the wires, screw them back in. Next, we are going to put in the wires that will power the ramps board. You're going to need 2 white and 2 black 18 gauge. The colors don't really matter, you just need 2 negative and 2 positive. But they are going to be cut probably to about a ½ meter each. And you'll do exactly what you did with the power cable. These first 3 ports here are all your positives, and the second 3 are all your negatives. Now we're only going to use the first 2 of each one though. So we'll go ahead and put in our first positive underneath here. Tighten that one. Put in our second positive. Tighten that one. And as I said, we're going to skip the third one because it's also a positive and go to ports 4, 5, and 6. And there you have it. Your power supply has all the wires it needs going in and out. Next, we are going to bring over the ramps, which the power supply is going to go into the green connectors on the end of the ramps. I don't know if you'll be able to see, on the back they're labeled positive, negative, positive, negative. So you're going to do your white wires, your positives, are going to go in the first and third slot, and your black ones are going to go into the second and fourth slot. And those work pretty much the exact same way as the ones we just did. You're going to use a flathead screwdriver to open up the ports on the bottom, and then swing around, put in the white on that side, and then screw it back in. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then go over the assembly of the entire ramps board and show you how everything plugs in. Alright, finally, we are ready to put our end stops on, and that'll be the last thing that we're going to actually mount to the printer besides the ramps board. So first off, we've already went ahead and soldered our end stops on the NC and COM ports. If you notice, the back of the end stop has 1, 2, 3 leads, ports. We're going to skip the middle one, do the first and last. So it's NC and COM. And then it slides right in to our end stop holder here. We're going to use an M2 bolt that came with the kit to secure it in there. And we're going to do it for all 3 of them. And really they're just going to be placed on the printer at the extremes of each point. So say we put this here on the Y-axis, going to push it till it snaps on there. Now when the Y bed goes here, it'll stop. There's a little bit of wastage on the bed size here, so we can adjust all of that later. If you wanted, actually, you could put a smooth rod that extends farther and put the end stop on that. So that's our Y-axis. Next, we're going to clip it onto our X, probably right about here. Again, you got to snap it on there. The tighter the fit, the better. So put that on there, and then that slides over. Nope, you got to get to where the motor clicks it, so maybe on the opposite side of it a better choice, but you can switch that over afterwards. And then finally the Z-axis, which you're going to have to test the absolute lowest low you can do this, just because you want it to click right before the nozzle touches the bed, and we will go over that in the testing segment. I'm going to clip that on right there. It'll probably go somewhere about right there. But again, once you get the motors plugged in, start lowering the Z-axis, you'll be able to click it at the exact point. So we're going to go ahead and wire up the electronics and do a little bit of videos on how they work and what their uses are. And then we'll mount it to our printer where we had already showed the electronics mounting plate and plug everything in. So stick with us. Alright, so we just finished up with our end stops and putting those on. We went over some of the electronics and their uses and how to wire them up, but we've gone ahead and taken everything off just to give a fresh start for the electronics assembly. We left on the stepper drivers and the power supply as well, but we'll quickly go over the minus plus configuration on the green ports where the power supply, the black and white corresponding wires where they go in. We're going to start off next by doing the ceramic cartridge heater and the heated bed in these blue D10 through D8 ports. And we'll take the red ceramic cartridge heater wire that we have, and it's the sort of thick coated kind of clothy looking wire. And it'll go in the D10 and plus spots. It doesn't matter which one goes in which as long as they're both in there. And we will tighten that down using these screws on top. You want to make sure these are stuck all the way in and tight so they don't come out mid-print. Next, we are going to take our heat bed wires, our 2 negatives and 1 positive coming off of there, stick it in the D8, or I'm sorry, D9, tighten it down. The white heat bed wire, the positive, will go in the plus. We're going to come back and revisit this extra plus sign at the very end. And then D8. Alright, those are all in there, and like I said, we'll come back and visit that extra port later. Next, we are going to do our motors next. So we'll just try and pick out where each one is. We have our motor lead wires that we need to put into the board. We'll find the X, we'll do that one first. That one will be, oh, right here. So the X we're going to put in these ports here, the 2A, 2B, 1A, 1B ports. The black and green are going to be our 2A and 2B. So we'll go ahead and stick those in as they go. Alright, and we'll go ahead and do that with all of our other wires, or motors. Find their leads. And stick those in. Now you'll notice we have 2 Z motors. We'll just stick those in the 2 spots. The Z port has spot for 2 motors. So we'll do that on both of those. Okay, and our last one is our extruder motor, which we have here, and it's going to go in the, ooh, I have a hot mess of wires. It's going to go in the E0 spot, since like we said before, we only have 1 extruder, and that extruder is E0. So we've got those in. Alright, so we've got all of our motors plugged in now. We need to next look at our thermistors and then our end stops. And I believe that is the, oh, and then we have to revisit that positive. Alright, so we have our thermistors. We have the white wire that's coming off the hot end. That is going to go into T0. Right here next to the Z motors, you'll see a T0, T1, and T2. So the white will go into, the extruder will go into T0, and the heated bed thermistor will go into T1. Alright, so we've got our thermistors in T0 and T1, our motors plugged in, the heated bed and ceramic cartridge heater and the power supply. Last, we are going to do the end stops. So we have here S, minus, and plus, and then we have 6 spots. We want to use just 3 of them, And those spots are 1, 3, and 5. That's going to be X, Y, and Z. So first spot will be X, so let's grab our X and stop. Go ahead and reach around here. And your COM is going to go into the minus, and your NC is going to go into the S. So you don't want to look back at the end stop and see which leads are those, but we know. So, COM minus, NC, S. And then we will grab our Y and stop next. Stick it in the third position on the end stop spot, and it actually is labeled end stop, so it's not too hard to locate. And then the fifth spot is going to be the Z end stop. And where did we put that? Back here. There we are. So, spot number 5 will be Z end stop. Again, make sure your wires are plugged into the correct spot. But yeah, that's about it. Obviously, we're going to have to go back and clean these up, make them look a lot nicer. Use zip ties, tie them back, whatnot. So, lastly, we need to revisit this open positive here. And we've cut a small length of 18 gauge wire. And what we're basically going to do is just loop that around from the D9 positive to the D8 positive. It's going to be a little bit tough to jam them both in there because they are a bit thick. But yeah, that's all we're going to do. So we'll go ahead and stick that in there and tighten it down. And then loop it around to the other white. Complete the circuit. Oops, I lost my drip. My bad. Alright, so we'll do that. We'll get our wires cleaned up, and we will come back and start doing the software and showing you how the tests come out.